All right, good morning. I would like to call the regular meeting for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority for Thursday, April 9th, 2026. It is 10:03 and we'll go ahead and get started. So, Martina, will you please take roll call?
Certainly, sir. Starting with Bolinas Fire District, we have Chief Krakauer. For Mill Valley, do we have Todd Cusimano? For the city of San Rafael, do we have Chief Roman?
Present.
For the city of Larkspur, do we have Dan Schwartz? County of Marin, do we have Chief Marcucci?
Present.
For Inverness, do we have David Briggs?
Here.
Kentfield Fire, do we have Chief Pomey?
Here.
For Marinwood, do we have Eric Drakeson?
Here.
For Muir Beach, do we have Chief Gove? For the city of Novato, do we have Chief Peters?
Here.
For Sleepy Hollow, Chief Mahoney.
Here.
For Southern Marin, Chief Tubbs.
Here.
For Stinson Beach, do we have Chief Perry? For the town of Corte Madera, do we have Adam Wolf? For the town of Fairfax, do we have Heather Abrams? For the town of Ross, do we have Krista Johnson?
Here.
And for the town of San Anselmo, do we have Dave Donnery? Okay, so Chief, we do have a full quorum, and it looks like we will need to take roll call vote for the consent calendar.
Okay, great. Thank you. Item number 3, agenda adjustments. Do committee members or staff have any adjustments to the agenda? All right, moving on to item number 4, open time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the Operations Committee at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised that pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matters not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 2 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting. Mute your microphone when not speaking. Martina, is there anybody who wishes to make public comment online?
We do not have any hands at this time, but I did want to state for the minutes, we do have Heather Abrams for the town of Fairfax in the remote environment.
Okay, is there anybody present today that'd like to make public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to item number 5, Planning and Program Managers Report. This is where we will receive report from the planning and program managers. And Anne, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'll just share my screen and provide a few brief updates here generally on what we've been up to. This is a photo from a visit from the Resources Legacy Fund. They're a Sacramento-based nonprofit that works in funding and policy development and been working a lot in Sacramento and throughout the West, really focusing on environmental and conservation related topics. And they came to visit us in March 24th, I want to say. And we hosted them for several hours and highlighted the great work that all of our member agencies are doing. Particularly, we hosted them at the Sleepy Hollow Community Center, took them to the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, and also to a home in the area that was doing home hardening and defensible space to really highlight that house out approach that we're taking and how all of these different tools work together. Driving in vans on those roads really highlighted the need for evacuation planning. And then we had a great kind of tabling event in the building and some lunch that they paid for. This is their board. It's about 30 different board members from all around the West. And they asked us to host a board meeting for them. And so it was a great event. And we're hoping that this just continues to highlight the great work that everybody is doing and the nexus between what we're doing and that kind of environmental conservation world. So we'll see if there are future ways to collaborate that we can think of now that we're building this relationship. So we're excited for that. We're also planning a strategic planning session with the board of directors. We're still looking for a date as far as I know, unless there's I think it's very difficult to find a date for all of the entire board to show up on a day. We're looking at Saturdays. We'll see. Stay tuned. It takes time. I want to also note that we are finalizing the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, the CWPP, and we have a date for that public meeting. We're inviting the public to join us at Embassy Suites in San Rafael, probably starting at 9:30. Doors open at 9:30, kind of tabling, meet and greet, and then presentation would start at 10, and then we'd close up shop by noon. And so that would be May 2nd, Wildfire Preparedness Day. And we have a flyer that we're about to send out to all of your member agencies. Fire Safe Marin has been helping build that public outreach component. So a big plan to get the word out and to get all those materials to your PIOs. We've been working with the CWPP stakeholders on all of that. I'll skip the next item and just note that many of us were at the WUI conference in Reno recently, and Marin Wildfire, the JPA, all of you, received an award. And that is Wildfire Mitigation Award that's sponsored by the NFPA, NASF, and IAFC. So that's the International Association of Fire Chiefs, National Fire Protection Association, and National Association of State Foresters. And so Mark and Catherine Hilliard, on behalf of the whole JPA, were able to go up on stage and accept the award. So it was a great way to highlight all of the work that you all are doing in wildfire prevention. And so we're excited to highlight that. We have a press release that'll be going out very soon to highlight all this great work. We're hosting field trips. This is a really busy time of year, trying to cram field trips into all of our busy schedules. We were excited to host the public at a Fire Smart demonstration garden at Novato's headquarters. That took place in late March, I think on the 27th. That was really well attended, and it was a little different from our usual attendees at Shaded Fuel Breaks. So we got garden clubs and master gardeners, etc. Really got to highlight that design and how that garden is specifically designed with native plants and with different features to slow down the movement of fire. So that was a great event, and we're hoping to do maybe a few more of those. Our next field trip is in San Rafael. That's going to be April 24th, 10 a.m. to noon, and that'll feature San Rafael Hill. This is a photo of San Rafael Hill. Not necessarily exactly where the field trip will go, but it shows the removal of gorse and broom in that understory, that non-native fire hazardous vegetation. So we're excited to bring people out to that site, and we'll be sending out an email with a request for RSVPs, probably later today or tomorrow. And we'll want to get the word out. Space is limited, so we'll be requiring RSVPs for that event. And I think that's it for my report here. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ann. Is there any questions from the committee? Okay, we'll open it up to public comment either online or present.
There are no hands at this time, sir.
We'll bring it back for discussion on the committee. This is not an action item. Okay, no discussion. Thank you, Ann. Appreciate it. Moving on to item number 6, the consent agenda. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on the consent calendar. Items will occur prior to the committee's discussion on the consent calendar. The committee may approve the entire consent calendar with one vote. In the alternative, items on the consent calendar may be removed by any committee or staff member for separate discussion and vote. Would anybody like to remove anything from the consent calendar? Okay, we'll bring it to public comment on the consent calendar, either in person or on Zoom.
There are no hands at this time.
Great. So I have a motion to move approval.
Second.
Second, Martina, can you please take roll call?
That was a motion by Dan Schwartz with a second from both from Eric Drakeson. And starting with, in order of those present for the city of San Rafael,
Yes.
city of Larkspur, county of Marin,
Yes.
Inverness,
Yes.
Enfield,
Yes.
Marin Wood,
Yes.
Muir Beach,
Yes.
Novato,
Yes.
Sleepy Hollow,
Yes.
Fairfax, Ross.
Yes.
And I just will note for the purpose of the minutes that we did have a unanimous vote. We did not get that vote from Fairfax. I will follow up with Heather Abrams. For now, we have the motion passes with one abstention or one non-vote.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 7, discussion items, the fiscal year 26-27 work plan development update and draft proposals. I'll turn it over to Ann.
Great. So this is the big item on the agenda today. I'm going to share my screen here. All right. So last month, this committee heard summaries of the draft JPA-wide proposals and discussed, we provided feedback. And this month, today, we'll hear summaries of the zone-specific proposals, and then you'll be invited to provide input, discuss, provide feedback, ask questions, etc. And then in May, we'll meet again, and that's when we'll want to take action and provide a recommendation to the board. So a little more context here. For those online not familiar with this process, each year Marin Wildfire and its member agencies creates a plan for the next fiscal year starting July 1. And so that means, how do we spend those $22-23 million of taxpayer funds wisely, most efficiently for wildfire prevention among all the different agencies and programs? And we work on that process from December through May, and then the board takes action in May for that work plan to be in place before July 1. The operations committee makes decisions around what proposals are included and how to allocate those dollars. Throughout the process, the exact dollar figures, vary from meeting to meeting as the different member agencies fine tune their proposals and how to allocate those dollars. So I just want to note that all of these dollar figures that you'll see today are draft and they're in process. So for today, I'll give a quick overview of the process to date this year, a quick overview of the budget as it is currently, and then we'll invite member agencies to help present kind of an overview, a walkthrough of their zone-specific proposals. So as folks are available in the waiting room, in the Zoom room, etc., we'll be inviting them in to help discuss these proposals. And then you all can be part of that discussion and ask questions and interrupt as needed. And then we'll have a more robust discussion at the end. Our ATC chair, Todd Lando, is also here, and he will be helping provide the perspective of the ATC, because that group, that working group has discussed these as well, and they'll want to share their perspective. And then from there, I'll take the input that we received today and work with member agencies and work on the spreadsheets and a new packet, and we'll revisit all of this again in early May. And so no decisions need to be made today, but I'd love to hear your input. So this is the overall schedule, and the check marks indicate what we've done to date. So we started in December. Things really ramp up in March and into early April in terms of submitting proposals into an online portal that member agencies have access to. We try to get the JPA-wide proposals in first to get an idea for the core budgets that are then distributed and communicated to the member agencies. And then by the end of March, I asked member agencies to be done submitting their proposals. April, we end up fine tuning and adding and subtracting and kind of going back and forth with spreadsheets and project lists, etc. So there's a lot of coordination going on even now. So the packet of proposals is attached to this agenda online. So anyone joining us online can jump to the agenda and click on those attachments, and they should be able to see all of the proposals that we'll discuss today. We also have those proposals available online through the portal. And so you can view the 26-27 proposals. During this month, we'll probably want the Ops Ad Hoc Subcommittee to meet again to discuss any of the proposals that come up today that warrant further discussion. We can play that by ear and see if that's needed, but usually that's needed to finalize things and make sure we're ready for the May meeting. And then the board last year requested that we go to them twice to share all these proposals 2 times during 2 meetings because it's a lot of content and they'd like more time to kind of wrap their heads around what's being proposed and really kind of mull it over and be ready for board action in May. So next week, we'll be presenting the JPA-wide proposals to the board. No action is going to be needed by the board, but it's an opportunity for them to hear summaries and ask questions, etc. Chief Mahoney has volunteered graciously to join me there. It's been voluntold graciously. Assuming he's available, he will be joining me there. And I'm hoping that the ATC, Todd Lando, if you can join me, that would be great. Make sure that the ATC's perspective is shared. And so during that time, we'll stay at a really high level. The executive committee also heard summaries, I think it was last week, from myself and Mark on the JPA-wide proposals. So that recording is out there. So we've invited the board to go back and watch the executive committee meeting, which is also available for anyone online and any of you to review as well. So plenty of opportunities to hear about these proposals. So just a reminder, we have a strategy that was shared with the ATC that the Operations Committee came up with. And just very briefly, that includes the house out approach, home hardening defensible space, shaded fuel breaks, prescribed fire, evacuations, and all the text is here. We've presented on these before, so I won't go into detail. Working with insurance companies and then and on insurance related issues, and then public education. And then the new item for this year was ignition reduction. And then one item was removed that was no longer relevant. So all that was sent or presented to the ATC, and that was considered as proposals were submitted. And then assuming we have a 2.5% CPI that is board approved. So these are the numbers we're going with for the overall budget. This gives us about $23.5 million for the next fiscal year. 60% of that revenue is the core budget. That's about $14 million. 10% of that goes to administrative costs. And then you subtract out the JPA-wide proposals to get the core budget that's remaining. That then gets distributed among the zones according to the revenue generated in each zone. So that's below. And then, of course, 20% goes to DSpace related proposals, and 20% is a pass-through to local. And just a note, just because this says 20% for defensible space does not mean that's the limit of what we spend on defensible space. I know in the 25-26, it's more like 28%. So, and I anticipate that's going to be even higher this year as we all work towards supporting defensible space, home hardening, and Zone 0 work in particular. Given the current draft core budget, these are the numbers for local and DSpace for each of the agencies and the zones. So this has been sent to the member agencies and used to help calculate project proposal costs. And then this is where we are currently for the draft JPA-wide proposals. This isn't particularly different from what you've seen before. There has been one slight change. Sanderfeld requested that we move the fireside dollars related to the grant program out of the grant program budget and into a fireside budget. So that number has changed, but everything else has remained largely the same. I also want to note, Dan Schwartz, you had a question about administrative costs versus operational costs. This slide is in response to that. This is pulled from our policy, our financial policy, which is available online for anyone listening to jump into and take a look at. So the question, at least in part, was around what costs go towards the administrative budget, so that 10% out of the core versus operational costs. And I'll just note, it's a lot of text on here, but operational costs are defined as costs associated with the development and implementation of core defensible space and local prevention projects on a day-to-day basis. Examples might include equipment, project implementation, salaries and wages of personnel developing and implementing these projects, facilities and related insurance, research, innovation and development, etc. So I'm happy to dig into that more if needed. But I wanted to make sure we got back to you on that. And then from here, I think we'll dig into the zone-specific proposals unless we want to pause and address any of the topics from the previous slides. So I'll hit pause here just to check in.
Thanks, Ann. Are we going to have the opportunity to go back to the JPY proposals? Because the one that's in the current board packet versus the one that we were presented last month, there's quite a bit of differences that I found. And so
Okay.
I'm hoping we can get some explanation on why some of those numbers and figures changed.
Okay, we can dig into that and see what the discrepancies are.
Great.
Yeah.
Along those lines, I think one of the items was left with a lot of uncertainty among this group, which was the presentation about whether to have in-house or out-house for managing communication. And so I was surprised to hear this has already gone to the executive committee. Can you tell us what was presented to them? Yeah, because it's awkward for this group to hear, in my opinion, to hear that presentation of this material has gone to board members when we weren't of one mind about some of these items.
Yes, and that was communicated that all of these are in draft form and that the operations committee would be talking about that subject specifically and the other proposals. So it was an overview ahead of the board meeting, but it was not meant to, and it was not presented as these decisions had been made and these are final.
I guess I'd only ask, and I want on the record, and you can share with Mark, I think it's unfair to us because essentially you took information we're still debating to some of our bosses that we work for in another context. And I just think in this case, probably low stakes, but I want you to be sensitive to the fact you're adding a political element to the conversation before this committee, which is supposed to take our technical expertise and our financial acumen and give you advice. And now there's another element that we might have to be sensitive to. That may not be in play for this item, but that process makes me uncomfortable because someday it could be a problem.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, so I think what we'll do next is jump into the zone-specific proposals. And what I'll do is I'll start with, let's see, I think I'll jump into the attachments from the board packet. And is anyone from West Marin on the line? Will you take a look in the, is Gavin Albertoli there and any of the West Marin agencies? You could bring him over. Okay.
And for those of you joining us in the remote audience, if you would like to speak on behalf of our West Marin agencies, please go ahead and raise your hand in the reaction so that we can bring you over to present.
Hmm. Great. Hi, David. Thank you for joining us. I think what I'll do, I know that Bolinas is not present with us today, and we'll just go through and I'll summarize as needed. But now, Chief Briggs, why don't you go ahead and walk us through Inverness's proposals, and I will share my screen.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. Just our local proposal, right?
Sure. And anything you want to say about the core is great too.
Okay. Yeah, so our local projects, we will continue as we have done in previous years. We're going to do some evacuation routes, clearing along some roads in town here. There's a couple of problem areas that we want to tackle this year. We're hoping to get a PG&E grant for one of them. Did not come through, unfortunately. So we're going to use some of our local funds for that. And then we will also continue with our D-space inspections, contracting with the county for that. And then for, the West Marin agencies are going to do some more, the Coastal Fuel Reduction Network. We're part of that. Our allotment there is going to be just under $90,000.
Great, thank you. Hi, Gavin.
Questions, yeah.
Do you want to, is there anything you'd like to say about West Marin proposals?
Yeah, and I can go over
Happy to jump in.
our Marin County specific proposals as well.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, I missed what David said, but I think he talked about our core proposals. The other one was the West Marin Evacuation Route Core project. That's a previously approved project that we've had in our work plan for the last 3 years. With that project, we will complete some initial treatment on several West Marin roads and will give us the opportunity to conduct a maintenance pass on roads that were previously treated 3 or 4 years ago. And I think David talked a little bit about the Coastal Fuel Reduction Network project, but we're putting the majority of our funding this year into that work, leveraging the Governor Newsom's 2025 executive order, and building on work that was done last year in Stinson, Bolinas, Muir Beach, and Inverness. And that work will be implemented utilizing contractors as well as our county fire fuels and fire crews. That's core. And then should I go into our local projects? Okay. So for county fire, I'll start with defensible space. Just like in previous years, all of that funding will be allocated to inspections in our jurisdiction, utilizing our county fire seasonal inspectors under the Marin Defensible Space Alliance. Moving into our local projects, we have our vegetation treatment program. This is another previously approved project that has been in our work plan the last several years. This allows us to conduct veg management projects such as fire hazardous plant removals, evac route clearance, and residential direct assistance work in state responsibility areas as well as our county service areas. The one new local proposal we have is the Marin Emergency Radio Authority and Critical Communications Infrastructure Expanded Defensible Space Project. Main objective of this project is to make our emergency communications infrastructure more resilient to wildfire with increased defensible space and vegetation clearance. The proposal includes the expansion of defensible space around Mira and other communications infrastructure throughout the county. We're looking at the area out to 200 feet, depending on fuel type and condition at each location. Again, vegetation management work will be completed utilizing tree contractors as well as our internal fire foundry and TAM fire crews. The proposal includes funding for compliance and implementation, and myself and our program staff will be completing the inventory of each site and developing the project and project scope, managing implementation, and creating an inventory and long-term maintenance plan for each of the sites. That concludes our local and D-Space projects. Here for any questions.
I have a question. How many sites do you plan on treating?
Yeah, so of the 18 sites, we're only looking to inventory 16, so not including Sonoma Mountain as well as the site on this building. So 16. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gavin. Okay, so many of the proposals are the same from last year to this year. In West Marin, one new item from Stinson Beach is partial funding towards a utility vehicle that will be used to deploy an evacuation siren. So that's a way to give residents an auditory alert to evacuate. So that's a new item this year. Any other questions on West Marin? Bolinas, just a note about the Coastal Fuel Reduction Network. That is the item that is covered through that emergency proclamation in coastal areas. That emergency proclamation that the governor's office provided has been a key tool in order to streamline the environmental compliance. We still did a significant amount of environmental compliance and biological surveys, et cetera, but it just fast tracks that process. So you go through the Coastal Commission, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, State Water Resources Control Board, and others to get that compliance in place. And that coordination just goes lightning fast. And so that expires after 2 years. So that's the urgency to put resources towards actually implementing those projects now while we have compliance in place. Any questions about West Marin? Okay, let's jump into the central zone and invite, is Todd Lando on the line?
I'm here.
Great. I'm going to share screen and just share the summary spreadsheets here. And then Todd, go ahead and jump in.
Okay, the way my screens are set up here, I'm not sure I'm going to see precisely your what's on your screen, but
I'll just navigate to whatever you're talking about.
yeah, no trouble. For the central zone, I'll start with our work plan with core projects, which are the defensible space and home hardening program, supplemental funds, the central zone evac route and vegetation management, the central zone greater Ross Valley shaded fuel break, and then a new project or flashy fuels management, which is going to have some changes. So essentially for the central zone, the approach this year is just steady, deliberate. We're not proposing any major new projects. We're continuing the model that we really set up in year one, which was intended to streamline the delivery of these projects across 8 separate agencies. We have the most complex sort of political structure given the number of fire taxing authorities that exist in the central zone. So we're focusing on maintaining, building on what's already working. Most of the core program is continuation work, vegetation management, the D-Space inspection program, which we strengthen and supplement with funds from the core, and then maintenance of the fuel reduction projects, the major ones that are already underway. So what we're looking at just protecting that investment, keeping these areas functioning, and not really expanding into new commitments until these ones have seen follow through. So the one addition, there's a project on here, the Flashy Fuels program, that you may see some changes to that. We're in discussions with Ann, and we think that there may be some opportunities to tighten this up or
or make some changes to streamline this and deliver it faster. We're discussing that right now. So there is a chance that we might, either significantly alter this, even potentially pull the project and reallocate the funds. We're discussing that and have a couple meetings set up in the coming week. So that project was aimed at managing grasses and lighter fuels. It was modeled on projects that already exist in all of the other zones except for the West Marin zone, primarily on county park lands or lands that are outside of county parks using grazing mechanical treatments like weed whips and grass cutting exclusively on flashy fuels. We are going to also allocate some rollover funds to the Camp Tamarancho project, which we had last year. There's no new allocation. That's a project that really was completed, but we have an opportunity to expand it a tiny bit within the original footprint. So overall, the theme is follow through, maintain what's working, and avoid taking on new work that we can't sustain when there's existing work that needs maintenance. As far as the local projects, we've taken a consistent approach across all of those 8 agencies. We essentially break our programs, our local funding programs, down into defensible space voluntary abatement projects and invasive vegetation treatment. The only deviation from that, that's across central zone or central Marin agencies, Larkspur and Corte Madera, Kentfield, and all the Ross Valley agencies, Fairfax, Ross, San Anselmo, and Sleepy Hollow. Sleepy Hollow does have one program that deviates from a little bit from our approach, and this is an ongoing program that they've now been running for several years. That's their direct assistance program. And essentially, each agency is splitting their funds pretty much down the middle into defensible space, voluntary abatement, and invasive vegetation treatment. So they were just looking for consistencies. Our approach has been inspection-driven model first. All the agencies really invest in the defensible space program. We think it's the best return on our investment, and that the harder we work at the defensible space inspections, the more public contact we get, the greater the return on investment in the community, with residents significantly investing in their property with support from things like our voluntary abatement programs. And then we're able to target that direct assistance that we provide rapidly, since we're using local funds, sometimes within hours of identifying issues through the defensible space program. That I think sums it up. Appreciate it.
That's great. Thank you, Todd. And I think that there's one new project for Kentfield, the Fire Smart Demonstration Garden. Am I correct that that's new?
No, that was last year. We just
Oh, okay.
wasn't completed, so it'll be this plus additional rollover from last year.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay. Any questions for Central Marin agencies? Great. Okay. Thank you so much. I think we'll jump into the Novato zone, and I'll invite Sarah Laberton to come and speak on that, and I'll share my screen.
Thank you. Good morning. I will just quickly go through our programs and projects. Like Chief Lando, we are basically continuing a lot of our programs into this next fiscal year with just a few kind of big changes. We have 8, I believe, fuel break projects in maintenance phase. And then our Greater Nevada Shaded Fuel Break is continuing initial implementation and maintaining phase 1 areas that were completed a couple of years ago. We did a cost per acre analysis on all of our fuel reduction projects, and they do vary quite a lot. With our grazing project, it's about $1,400 an acre, and our Valley Memorial Eucalyptus project is $76,000 per acre, because it's a 1-acre plot that we've started back in 2022. So the restoration is continuing there. But our average for all of our fuel reduction projects is about $6,700 per acre. So we used this cost analysis and all of the modeling to build our budget for this next fiscal year. Some of the new projects that we have coming up, we are going to introduce a hazardous vegetation removal project, which is a a direct assistance project that will be managed by the vegetation management team at Marin Wildfire. The residents that would like to participate in this program, it's going to be invite only, and they have to be adjacent to a current fuel reduction project. So we're just trying to build those fuel reduction projects into the built environment a little bit more. And they will have to have a wildfire mitigation specialist come out to their property, do a full assessment, and finish a zone 0 resolution before we can go do the work. This is in addition to all of our existing free assessments that we provide to Novato residents and the grant program. We are also, we have a new project that's listed in core that may or may not be needed. It's kind of based on how the JPA core grant program is going to be run. So far from our conversations, the management agencies that have existing grant programs will be able to kind of take their section of the grant program and put it toward whatever our grant programs are. So I just have a core project that would be able to kind of have that money. If we don't need to have that, or we're just going to use the JPA code, that project will go. But that's there just in case for ease of budgeting. With that money, we do plan to use those dollars in our current grant program and potentially also pilot a juniper removal direct assistance project, which will just be similar to the Chipper program where people can sign up for juniper removal, and we'll send a crew out there a few times a month to do some big juniper removal projects. We are also moving the wildfire mitigation program manager staff position that used to be the vegetation management program manager staff position. We're going to move them to local. That position is now managing the vegetation programs and the defensible space programs. So that position will now live in local. And then something that came up at the ATC meeting last week was our defensible space programs and projects are kind of a little bit outside of the defensible space scope that's called out in the JPA, and our local programs, which are all of our grant dollars, they fit the defensible space language a lot better. So we're just swapping those two proposal areas. So all of our current for fiscal year 25-26 defensible space projects will become local projects in 26-27, and all of our local projects in 25-26 will become D-space projects in 26-27. The budgets will be the same. The programs will continue as they are, but that just for ease and to better fit the defensible space language in the JPA. That was a decision made last week. And I think those are all my updates.
Questions for Novato? Okay, great. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Okay. So I'll stop screen sharing the Novato items. And I'm going to ask Sanderfell, if anyone from Sanderfell is online, if you could jump over. I see Quinn. Hi, Quinn.
Good morning.
Okay. And I'll share screen in just a sec. Let me get that up. Okay. All right. Quinn, I have your local and D-space proposals up on the screen.
Great, thank you. I can see that. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. Similar to some of the earlier comments, there's a lot of continuing work and ongoing projects and maintenance included with a lot of that work. So we're, committed to that long-term and consistency, as well as trying new things and looking at some of the new modeling and opportunities that we have. And so just running down local, of course, are just like overall staff and project management and everything associated with that. And our D-space bucket has 2 line items. The lower, the 187 is like purely the seasonal staff, and then the 720 is everything that supports D-space around that. And we've also, of course, have our resident assistants. That number looks low this year, for two reasons. One, we're anticipating, like Sarah mentioned for Novato with the grant dollars from the JPA program or the JPA-Y program, as well as we're using a lot of rollover revenue. So the numbers reflected here are purely new revenue, but within the portal, we've also outlined which projects we plan on having any rollover or money from previous approved years that's going to be spent. So that is one. We actually are looking closer to about $800,000 in direct assistance for under the D-Space program. Largely, again, targeting wood shake roofs is one of the big costs we're accounting for there. Public education outreach and doing a lot of direct work. I think we've taken a lot from some of the discussions lately from Fireside and Xylo plan around how to get residents to engage more and being more targeted in that. And so with that comes the need to increase our outreach and education, similar to some of the Fireside campaigns that have been run, I think, by the Central Zone in the past. The Fire Adapted Trails is a new project that under local, we're in conversations with a nonprofit that's willing to look at on one of our less kind of formally developed areas and is interested in developing that. The fire adapted trails are really common in the Sierras, and not only then serve as good shaded fuel breaks and good economic stewards, but also really improve responder access for fires, medicals, anything. And so we put a little bit of money there just in case we needed to do any environmental studies or programmatic, but we actually think this might be a low or no cost project as we work through the MOU process with that nonprofit. Again, staff budgets there, small and responsive project. That number does look low, but again, that's actually a pretty large bucket when we account for rollover money going into that. And that's really the small and responsive is what we use if there's something new that comes up, if a hazardous tree falls, or we just get resident complaints or any smaller projects rather than listing every location we treat here. Education outreach, similar ignition reduction project that is the police ranger program, as well as efforts around like reducing ignitions associated with open barbecues, potentially distributing extinguishers and things like that. And then the Deer Valley Fuels Reduction Project, which will be a continuation of what's been going on this year. I believe we moved this from core to local, don't quote me for sure. And that's an ongoing project with the expectation, I believe we'll be doing some pile burns there potentially next year as well. And then in core, we have a couple other new projects I want to call out specifically, and I know this conversation started last year, is the Queenstone Surface Fire Road project essentially. And so following the fire a few years ago, that road was basically kind of almost at a point of being deoperable. And so one of the things that's been an ongoing challenge is no agency budgets for fire road repairs at this level. And then we obviously just end up with erosion issues every year because we're not fixing the roads in a way that's correctly managing water and runoff. And so the goal with this project is with the support of some partners to be able to get that road functional, but also in a way that's sustainable long-term from water runoff and good things like that. So that's a new project here. We've also got our water supply audit project. I think that dollar figure might be a little bit low. We're, rebalancing as we shuffle things around and get latest numbers as well. And the real goal with that project is to make sure in response to especially the LA fires and concerns we've heard from residents, we're going to flow test all of our WUI hydrants and make sure they're fully operational. And we are anticipating potential replacements within that. And that's something that, again, has never been budgeted for within the scope of the fire department, and current call volumes and other expectations are making that impossible to be handled with routine at the scale we want to do it. I think it's, over 1,000 hydrants that we'd be looking at within the WUI to make sure we're as operational as we need to be. Safe parking guidelines. This is really an evacuation route project. Making sure that we're keeping our roads passable. We are looking at working with County DPW this year and expanding that the CSAs and some other areas. Most of San Rafael proper has been completed. So we've learned a lot through that multi-year process and really have improved access and evacuation. The assistance dollars in local, or I'm sorry, in core, similar to what Sarah mentioned, that is with the anticipation of also having some additional money from the JPA. Wide funding, maintenance is in there. Flashy fuels, which includes our grazing program, as well as weed trimming and other pieces. The evacuation route budget will be bigger than that again with rollover and some additional funds that we've shifted around. And that's really going to be focused in CSAs. Lucas Valley is also listed as a specific target there. So we're really looking at, and that's why that's listed as a core project. I think in the past we've done it a little bit as a local. And most of the rest of those are pretty repeats. The last three are newer. We are going to move forward with the Xylo plan proposal that was put forward and I think was not looked at countywide or not agreed to go countywide, and it was going to be each zone deciding if they wanted to move on their own, and so that's there budgeted. We also have gotten, we recognize San Rafael's registration numbers for the emergency alerting system are lower than we want them to be and are some of the lowest in the county, largely because of language access and in a lot of our residential larger kind of Asian place facilities. So we're going to do some specific campaigns with that. We, learned from the evacuation study that having the information around evacuation is critical, and that's life-saving. So that's a campaign specific around Alert Marin registration for the whole zone. And then we are also looking at doing an evacuation plan specifically, and a lot of that's looking at contraflow on the major arteries like Manatee Freitas, San Pedro, South San Pedro, Lucas Valley, et cetera, and what it would take to implement contraflow if we needed to, with some budget to potentially buy equipment that the plan would recommend, like a variable message sign, barricades, et cetera. So really looking at how we can move a lot of people out of, I kind of like to describe Santa Fe as like a rib cage, with the 101 being kind of the spine and all of those offshoots of the rib. And so we're really looking at making sure we can increase traffic flow out of each one of those main corridors into onto 101 as quick as possible. So that should be an interesting plan. And of course, we'll share that document with anyone that's interested, but it will be very specific to San Rafael. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Quinn. Eric, do you want to say anything about local ND space proposals for Marinwood?
Sure. These are mostly continuations. The D-Space program consists almost primarily of home hardening, evaluation, inspections, the fuel reduction. We do have what is kind of the last remaining untreated open space WUI area is in the plans. Just now getting started on all the CEQA work. Otherwise, it's a lot of retreatment to previously treated areas and basic maintenance.
Great, thank you. Let's take a pause and see if there are questions about Santa Fe proposals. There are several new ones. So inviting questions and comments. Okay. Or we can move on to Southern Marin proposals, because I know Fred and Marshall are on the line, if that makes sense. Okay. Chief, yes, go ahead. I'll jump to my files and bring up the Southern Marin proposals. Or is
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so about Southern Wildfire and the city of Mill Valley.
Great. Okay, we're going to start off with Mill Valley local ND space here.
Perfect.
And I'll zoom in on this spreadsheet or this table. Great, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. So City of Mill Valley, the local ND space are all continued from last year, with the exception of one new item. It's around fire safe gardens. We had success in a previous one in the Southern Marin Fire District for some fire safe gardens, and we had some voice ideas around a couple of locations around the city of Mill Valley to provide some review and insight on installing a fire safe garden for display to the community. So that project's pretty straightforward there. Additionally, we did have success with our community fields management program, both helping large scale landowners as well as providing the direct assistance to individual residents on a quarterly basis for targeted specific fire hazard vegetation removal, as well as assistance around Zone Zero. So we not only did we have a successful pilot program in 2025, but then also all of the 4 quarters of this fiscal year, including this year, or including this quarter, we've had a huge increase of community success and outreach around our direct assistance program. So those funds there will be allocated within local funds. And then obviously we allocate all of our DSpace funds to funding the support staff around defensible space inspections full-time, our vegetation management for project implementation, as well as all additional support that leads our projects for implementation around that. Additionally, we have allocated funds towards the ongoing support, maintenance, and educational outreach around the emergency notification systems in the area, and additional local funds towards the partnership with the Defensible Space Alliance around defensible space inspections. And I don't know, do you want to go into a core with Mill Valley or continue on Southern Marin?
Let's continue with local and DSpace and move to Southern Marin, Muir Beach. Do you want to say anything about this, Chief Gove?
Yeah, I can talk briefly. So we're basically in maintenance mode on most things. We're just about done with the newer Twillager Grove project that we moved a whole bunch of hazardous trees and we're about to start doing fuel reduction on. Now that we've got a lot of the stuff being maintained, we've identified some new areas in the Banducci area that we're probably going to be wanting to take a look at. But our fuel reduction, community-wide has been quite successful with the chipper program, and we're real pleased with that. That's about it.
Great, thank you. Okay, I will head to Southern Marin Fire, local and DSpace.
All right. So yes, a lot of these projects look similar to the City of Mill Valley due to our restructuring last fiscal year. We don't have any new projects here. Similarly, the community fields management within local is still being allocated for all the same reasons that I explained for the City of Mill Valley. With that program, both on the Southern Marin side and the City of Mill Valley side, each one of them are receiving about 20 to 30 homes a quarter for that direct assistance being applied again to specific vegetation target hazards, as well as Zone 0 implementation. This also allows us the ability to focus on individual communities. Defensible Space Program with the Space Alliance, again, allocated along with the continued maintenance and education around emergency notification and evacuation within our systems. And then we have our full-time staff dedicated to within our DSpace funds. And then we have our project equipment line that provides us all of our resources and support to ensure we can implement all these projects.
Great, thank you. And I'll jump down to, I think we're at core now. So moving into the core proposals, go ahead.
So I'll fire off, since I think most of these are ours. Continued work on the Greater Mill Valley Field Break. In 2025, 2026, we finished our environmental review, broke ground in October of 25. We had 75 acres identified of untreated portions of this continued field break that we've been maintaining for years. These untreated areas, out of the 75 acres, we did complete about 55 of them, with another 15 slated for after northern spotted owl season. So probably in August we'll be breaking ground on those, as well as some area just recently approved with similar limitations in August for the water district. We also have ongoing on the Mill Valley Field Break another 75 acres. Actually, it's more than 75 acres, but 75 acres currently being reviewed for botanical surveys to allow us for rapid implementation going through probably in 2027 to ensure that we can continue to utilize and apply these funds directly to the application areas that are identified. Moving on from that, if I just break off to our other field breaks that have been going on for years, we have the Ring Mountain Field Break, the Tam Valley, Homestead Valley Field Break, and the Sausalito Forest Health Restoration Project, which is also a field break. Those are all for the Southern Marin Fire District. All three are very much in maintenance mode, but we have identified some new areas that we've been monitoring for a long time, mostly in the national park lands that we finally have been granted approval to review and move forward to, both also slated potentially to start in August with the seasonal application of about 22 acres of pretty dense broom removal in the Homestead Valley area, Homestead Tam Valley area. And then additionally with that, we have another allotment of about 5 to 8 acres in the Sausalito area that the National Park Land is working with us to review and grant permissions to be able to get in. So continued progress in areas previously untreated, and then regular maintenance seasonally. Ring Mountain Field Break, that area is obviously very sensitive, and we continue to work with all of our landowners and stakeholders to continue to maintain a lot of the lighter flashy fuels and fuel growth from French burn reoccurring in that area. The big new projects that are in this category for core are what we're calling CAP, or community adaptation programs. We have identified these specifically based on communities, as well as an overarching one for the entirety of the Southern Marin Fire District. Be it that they're core, we want to make sure we have these funds allocated specifically within our community partners, but also broadly available to us so we can be a little bit more flexible. The community adaptation program builds off of the community fuels management, but instead of being direct assistance, this also allows for us to allocate these funds within a core project bucket to provide direct assistance and home hardening, all in line with the Ember Ready program, so that we can be more influential within that program, within the individual home assessment reports that all of our homeowners are receiving. This allows us a direct line to our HOAs, our community partners, our neighborhood response groups, as well as our Firewise groups, to ensure that we can go in and build a more adaptive community within the wildfire risk assessments that they're receiving. And I believe those are all of our core projects that we have.
Great, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. And I just want to note that all of these projects, I have a working spreadsheet, or a few working spreadsheets. And one of the things that I track each year, as we're building the work plan is, what goals do each of the proposals address? And see if I can share here. So going through, tracking how many dollars we're putting towards each of our goals here. And then I added a new feature this year that I want to show you that's in progress. Still, imperfect, but I'm going through and reviewing those 8 strategic measures that this committee came up with this year, and putting a kind of a check mark under each item that these proposals are addressing, so we can kind of track which of your strategic guidance measures are being addressed and which could use additional emphasis in future work plans. So for example, I'm checking the house out approach for pretty much everything, because that, I think, all of the proposals generally support this item. Ignitions is very specific, so there are just a few items that address the ignitions strategic measure. Evacuations, I generally, a lot of the evacuation route work, some of the planning and modeling supports that. Shaded fuel breaks, the vegetation management proposals, many of them act as shaded fuel breaks, so adding those. Home hardening, defensible space, prescribed fire. I actually have a question for this committee if that includes not only broadcast burning, but pile burning, because if it includes pile burning, then that is addressed in many of our projects. A few of our projects include some level of broadcast burning, but many of our projects include opportunities for pile burning. So at this point, I'm putting a check mark next to proposals that include some pile burning. And those then support our goal of increasing prescribed fire across the landscape. So just an interesting exercise that I wanted to show you that's in progress, and I'll be able to report out more on that at our next meeting. And then I'm also tracking which proposals fund staff. So obviously the inspection programs that we have underway include the staff, the inspectors, to go and do that work. So I have that in a separate category. And then I'm also trying to parse out what proposals fund vegetation management related staff and others. So that's a work in progress. I still have questions for some of the member agencies to make sure that I have that right. I'm just kind of guessing on some of these proposals. And so I'll need, like Sandra Fell, I'll probably circle back with you on a few of your proposals to see if I'm getting that right, and we can dig into those details. But that's the kind of work I'm doing on the back end to try to track where we're putting all our dollars so that I can then report out to you and the board later. So with that, I want to invite discussion, questions, follow up on any of the topics that you've heard today, and then we have time for good discussions on all these proposals.
I was just going to ask if there was any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Krista Town Ross. This, I would assume, has probably been discussed at the ATC level, and perhaps Mr. Landau has some comments on it. But I noticed, many of these projects talk about maintaining the work, the significant and expensive work that's already been done. And so Ross, we have a little bit of money in our local funds, and we Ross Valley Fire works with the Corps, his colleagues, and we put it to identify areas in our community and our region that require fuel modification and vegetation management. Okay, that's great. What I found though is that now that those projects have been done, they're growing back, right? And now we've had several property owners call up our office in Ross and say, "Hey, when are you guys coming back and doing this work again?" And so we've been working with staff from Ross Valley Fire to really, and put information in our newsletter about, hey, this is a one-time thing. Because the project that was done last year, Chief Mahoney, was between Ross and San Anselmo, was significantly expensive. And so I'm curious about how the other zones, how the other fire agencies, jurisdictions are handling this issue. Because I definitely get, right, we make this big investment and we want to keep it going, but how do we balance that with private property owners' obligation to handle their own property? And so with our local funds in Ross, because if something happens, if there's a fire, when there's a fire, as Mark would say, I certainly want to make sure that town-owned property, we're going to be able to say, we've got our stuff handled, And so with our very limited amount of money, I want to spend it on to make sure that and with our town general fund, that we're handling our private property. But property, fire doesn't respect boundaries and all that good stuff. So this is a big picture question, and it would be helpful for me when I'm telling property owners, hey, we just did a bunch of work in your neighborhood. It's your responsibility now. If we have a consistent approach amongst the county where they're not able to say, well, my friend in, the Southern Marin, they're taking care of their property every year. And so maybe Mr. Landau can talk about that for Central Marin, but
Yeah, no, I could definitely speak to that for the central zone, especially, I presume that largely the project that you're getting this kind of feedback about is the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, and we get the same feedback in Larkspur, Corte Madera, and we have this conversation often. I'll tell you, even in the original grant proposal we submitted to CAL FIRE for funding the first phase of that project. We were very clear that the agencies are not proposing to adopt long-term maintenance of any privately owned or even public lands. This was a catch-up provision, essentially. Our goal was to recognize that there had been decades of deferred maintenance because no funding source existed, whether that's private property owners who didn't understand their obligations to maintain their own property according to the Public Resources Code, local ordinances, et cetera. And our goal was to help with that deferred maintenance that had occurred, the lack of public understanding, which is something we addressed through our public education efforts, and give them essentially a one-time catch-up. When we talk about maintenance, there are a handful of things, especially invasive plant control that once we touch it, it does require some follow-up from us, but it is not intended to be a long-term adoption. And I will say that even in the right of entry documents and the communications that we provide to the community when we do work on the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, which the other zones have all modeled their big WUI fuel breaks around. We tell people that you own this property. This is your responsibility, and we're helping you with this one time. I do see and hear you and think that there's an opportunity for us to better explain how the management of invasive plants and some of the issues that we create by conducting this work require long-term maintenance that is not the adoption of that responsibility for that property by the MWPA. But ultimately, I think our communications from day one have already stated this, and it may be a matter of the property owners need to look a little more closely at what we've communicated to them and make a bit bigger effort to understand what we've provided to them. And we should be looking at this as an opportunity to better learn, how we communicate this going forward if there's a lack of understanding.
I think this is a really important topic. Differentiating between what our responsibilities are and what the homeowner's responsibilities are, and if we're doing work on public lands, what the public land management agency's responsibilities are. A few things. One, we've prepared a trifold pamphlet that we have been giving to landowners on the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break as kind of a start, like, hey, these are ways that you can maintain the areas that we have done treatment. I think it's going to need to be a partnership. So we can provide everyone here copies of that. You could take a look at it and see if it meets your needs, and we could create an updated version or something more specific to your zone. But we're finding that conversation really important, and this pamphlet is a great tool to kind of have that conversation. Also on the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, we're tracking costs on retreatment of areas previously treated. So we just retreated about 6 acres, I think, around Olema Road, broom pulling, and we're going to be really carefully looking at the math. So how much is the initial treatment, and then how much is retreatment afterwards? Because the initial treatment on the Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, as you know, is very expensive because it's the accessibility is challenging, the terrain, the slope is challenging. We're using hand tools to pull that broom. So it's really expensive, and we're going to be tracking how much the initial treatment versus the retreatment is so that we can help kind of extrapolate those costs and look at what kind of dollars we're on the hook for all of these projects that we have right now. We also have a process going with Marin County Parks so we just did a GIS exercise to take an inventory of all the projects that overlap Marin County Parks lands, how many acres we're talking about. So we'll be communicating with the different member agencies with that kind of draft list, that kind of map book and that exercise, and then communicating with Marin County Parks, how much of the maintenance, how often should maintenance happen, and how much is Measure A dollars, Marin County Parks funds versus our dollars, et cetera. So that may vary from project to project. So those conversations are happening. I'm also reaching out to member agencies like Novato, who's been tracking costs really closely so that we can look beyond the Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break at all of the different projects, what that initial treatment and then retreatment costs are. So that's been a request of mine to the ATC to share those dollar amounts so that we can really look at what we're committed to before we put, large polygons, new polygons on the map. So I agree, but I invite other folks to pipe in here.
So Todd, I just wanted to clarify that the complaints or the requests for additional work have mainly been about the roadside evacuation clearance, so not the big shaded fuel break project. And so I think the pamphlet would be, I would like to have it. I'd like to put in our newsletter and all that good stuff. I'm not sure if Ross Valley Fire puts that out because they manage our projects for us with the property owner. But at some point, we're going to have people that just say, we don't care, we're not doing it. And so that becomes code enforcement, right? And I'd be having this discussion with Chief Mahoney, definitely, but I just it would be useful to have a consistent approach and a consistent message. So it sounds like the education can be consistent, but then when it comes to bad actors, what do we do about that? I don't know. But thank you.
We're definitely trending into a code enforcement discussion in the central zone and probably elsewhere. That said, I think in general the same topics apply to the roadside work as do the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. When we look at roadside vegetation, there's probably an even greater misunderstanding of who's responsible for roadside vegetation. It's almost always private property, and for my decades of work in this topic, we've had so many discussions with residents who believe when they look at a parcel map, they see the public right of way in front of their property, and they'll tell us that, well, that's owned by the town. We know that's not true. They're responsible for the vegetation work, even if it's not on their own parcel, if it's between their parcel and a roadway. Helping people understand that is something that we absolutely work on. Our defensible space inspection program educates people, provides information about that, whether it's sinking in or not, or whether we need to work, more deeply on that is open for discussion. I think it's clear that we do need to do more work on this, but the property owners misunderstand their responsibility often with that long-term maintenance. And then there are some places where it's adjacent to public lands, and clarifying with our public works departments and our own agencies who's going to be responsible in the long term is probably a discussion we aren't having enough also.
And I'll just note on the evacuation route work, doing work in those county road rights of way requires an encroachment permit. And so we have been working with, and we just met, I think maybe yesterday, with County DPW to get the conversation started about an annual encroachment permit, kind of a blanket encroachment permit for us. They're very comfortable with our environmental compliance and our project design and implementation features. And so they'd like to extend kind of an annual blanket permit for us and our member agencies to do this work. But that also provides an opportunity to do more coordination with County DPW and figure out who's doing work where, and put our heads together to see if there are areas that are a priority for both of us. And if they were already going to do work there, maybe they do that work and we hang back and put our Measure C dollars elsewhere. So there's a lot of conversation around that as well. I just wanted to note. And also thank you so much for delivering these. We have a whole stack of these pamphlets that are for landowners who've had work done on their property. And feel free to take a look and maybe take a stack with you afterwards and take a look at it. And if there are suggestions around wording language, let us know, because we can modify this based on input, from the operations committee or others, to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of that communication with private landowners.
Okay, are there any more questions for Ann or any one of the member agencies as far as work plans?
Any of the proposals that you'd like to dig into further while we have staff available to answer questions?
I think Chief Pomey did have a question about some of the funding, and maybe what we'll do is we'll take public comment and then we'll bring it back for discussion. Does that sound good? Yes.
Oh, okay.
And there are no hands for comment at this time.
Okay, anybody in the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back for discussion. And Chief Pomey, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Dan. I
and this just could be me, so please hear me out. One of my struggles that I have is with the different versions of these charts, these graphs, these documents that come to us. And I don't look at them every day. I'm pretty sure everybody in this room wears a lot of different hats. But I'm looking at the ATC document that was early last month, and then 6 days later, we were presented as an ops group with the draft JPA wide, excuse me, budget document that was different. And then the one that's presented in our current board packet is different again. And so I just, it's one of those things that I think it makes it more complicated than it needs to be. And, when we look at the final total JPA wide proposal number, there is a difference than what we were presented last month. And I'll use the example of the CWPP. And I honestly don't know where that currently stands, but last month when we were presented $14,850 for metrics, for maintenance or whatever, and then in the current document, metrics is $40,950. So it's a $26,000 increase. But then, it's the way the wording goes. So then you take the CWPP 81,000 for updates, and you say, well, now the CWPP initial update is only going to be 47,000. So to me, it looks like there's just movement of funds up and down a lot of these documents, and there's just no explanation. And I think what happens is the ATC meets, they make recommendations, they go through, their procedures, and then by the time it comes to us, it's a little bit different again. And then, now I'm hearing that these documents, in a sense, were presented to the executive board, or executive members of the governing board. There's MWPA operational costs that were up 9,000 compared to last month's. And there's the environmental compliance that's up 5,000. There's just has been a lot of changes that I don't think were particularly discussed, especially at this level. And I think these versions just keep changing. And so if it's just me, I apologize, but that's one of my big struggles right now.
Okay, thank you for that question. So I'll go through maybe the more recent changes to any of the JPA wide. If the metrics was down to 14, that would have been a typo. But this is a breakdown for that kind of CWPP related item. I'd actually like to rename that item because only a portion of that proposal is CWPP related. So this is a breakdown of that kind of, let's say, data-driven item. One portion of it is related to metrics and dashboards. So we collect data, we process the data. Green Info Network and Willow Labs are really processing that data. So that's especially related to the inspections, fire-side data, and then also vegetation management, the shaded fuel breaks. That gets processed and then turned into, it gets used in our modeling to update kind of the risk reduction. That gets put on public-facing dashboards. And so this item continues that process and supports those public-facing dashboards. The next item is ongoing as-needed support for member agencies to coordinate with Willow Labs around the modeling, et cetera. So we can use it if we need it, and we don't need to use it if we don't need it. But that includes about 20 hours per zone. And then the third item is CWPP updates. This is specific to kind of a to-do list for 26-27 and is separate from future updates of the CWPP. So this, for example, fire resilient roads, continuing to incorporate inspection data, et cetera. So it does take dollars to continue maintaining the CWPP and continuing to keep the CWPP kind of online tool active, et cetera. This dollar amount, because the ATC expressed concern over the original 26-27 proposal, this dollar amount was cut basically in half and kind of minimized in terms of the to-do list for 26-27 to maintain the CWPP that we're about to finalize. And so that is the movement in dollar amounts. It was in response to the ATC wanting a cut in the 26-27 dollars. And so I think it would be useful to rename this proposal and not call it a CWPP proposal, because only a third of it is related to the CWPP.
Right, and most definitely. So all three of those should be three separate line items with explanations. And then then you can't use the comparable, because last year we put 300,000 towards the CWPP, and now, we're showing 144 in a sense this year. So again, this is a version control thing that just keeps bouncing around. And I'll go back to also the one I didn't mention was the resident grant program at 900,000. And I know at last month, and that's when Dan brought up, liking to see the total cost for all operations, all personnel, consultants, staff, everything, not just a policy, but what those costs are, because we were presented a $900,000 number, but we knew that wasn't the true number that's going to the residents for grants, because there's built in, I believe it was like software cost and some other things and staff to support that. So, here we are in the following month, and we're still looking at the 900 number and not maybe truly the 875 number, with a breakout of those operational staff cost. And so
I can go through that right now if you'd like. So $15,000 of that 900,000 was discussed between Santa Fe and Mark to pull that out and put it into the fireside proposal. So that moved out. The discussion also included keeping that 15,000 in the 900,000 grant budget, and those 15,000 would just go towards grants. Our grant specialist is leaving, and so it was also discussed how at the ATC and here how to approach that position moving forward. It was suggested that maybe we fill it as a half position to support, and then dollars would go directly towards say Santa Fe and Novato to include into their existing programs and distribute according to those programs, and then coordinate with the MDSA to either have defensible space inspectors assist with the distribution of that, or we can hire a grant specialist, say half-time, to do that work. So our grant specialist is still working with us and still distributing grants, but we're trying to plan ahead given that he is leaving in the next few months. So the dollar amount currently stays the same, and the $15,000 fireside number goes to the fireside account or proposal, and then the actual amount available for grants goes up because we've lost half of a position and we've removed the 15,000 in fireside. So that position is around 85,000. So the remaining portion would be 42,500.
I think if I can, though, Ann, just as a general comment and consistent with Chief Pomey's comments, we're managing over $20 million. We should be getting pretty detailed sheets, and we shouldn't have to jump between sheets and narrative and ask you questions to understand the breakdown of some of these numbers. I think and then I think your version control would take care of itself if you were giving a little more breakdown. It's just, we tend to see rolled up numbers. And to Chief Pomey's point, when we provide a line item like that, and then we put out the detail beneath the line item, if something's changed, it's just a footnote. Since you last saw these numbers, We moved $5,000 because we went to the ATC and they said to move it. And it's all on one sheet. Like you're just, it's creating a lot of work for your committee members and your board members to be bouncing back and forth. So, um, you know, I would love to see some maturity of the way we're showing our accounting and budgeting. That I don't think it'd be a lot of work for a person for like a month to shift the paperwork into that format, and then it'd be done.
Yeah, great. We can provide more detail on the different proposals. This one in particular is a work in progress.
And is it possible to have like a red line draft between these versions? I think that's what the chief is alluding to, is that when there's a change, I had a question just about the increase from 2 to 2.5%, where those monies, obviously we knew that was going to happen, but if there'd be some kind of red line draft like Dan was saying, it would be easier to understand where the changes happened.
Sure.
It also would be interesting to get the perspective that ATC has on why they proposed something, so we can understand that concept. Right now, we understand the concept that they changed it, or their recommendation was a little bit different, but sometimes we get it in a narrative, sometimes we don't, and it also depends highly on what we remember in the conversation. But I do have a feeling that there should be something documented on justification on why that was changed in there. And so we don't struggle from version control. It also seems kind of odd to me, and I don't have a suggestion on how to make it better, how we're doing multiple layers at the same time of hierarchy, right? So in my department right now, I have each division managing their budget for next year. And then I now, as the department head, run it to the city manager's office with the rest of the directors, who then runs it to the city manager's office, and then we run to council. So there's a layer that we don't never go back. We're constantly moving forward and advancing through this whole process rather than doing multiple layers at the same time. Seems to me that we're doing, and I'm not sure, it's probably because of the way we structured this, but there seems to be, to me, it seems that the ATC would do their work, present their work recommendations, then we go to operations. Operations was either support, modify, or support, hopefully support, but the ATC, and we move that forward. But I'm not sure if it's just because we just haven't allowed, because of the bureaucracy layers that we have here, don't allow that to happen, or the space and time just doesn't allow it to happen, because we're quickly finishing out our budget season. Maybe we take a reprieve for a couple of months and we're right back into it, trying to figure out our work plan, trying to figure all that stuff out. So maybe we need to take a pause and figure out what the long process is. And maybe by December 1st, we have to have the ATC has to have their approval. Then we get it in January, or I don't know. I mean, it seems like there's something better than what we're doing right now, because it is kind of frustrating having to figure out what version we're all looking at. And this happens all the time, where Chief Tubbs has one version, I have another version, and Eric has a different version. And now we're spending a great deal of time trying to organize what our last conversation was, and then getting reorganized and moving forward. And then we're never going to capture a baseline if we don't get it structured. Once we get it structured, we'll capture a baseline and we'll move forward from that, and we'll be far more productive and have less of these frustrating conversations, because this is frustrating, and more productive conversation to move the organizations forward and in alignment.
Okay, thank you for that.
And would it make sense? It'd be a long many-person meeting, but as you're earlier in this process, having a joint meeting of the ops and the ATC, where these discussions are kind of happening amongst and in real time. I know the ATC has moved into a different type of a body, but just everybody's hearing the same thing at the same time, and it's really hard for somebody from the ATC to take, okay, we just had a 2-3 hour meeting. How do I summarize that in a brief update to the entire ops committee? And the potential of having a joint meeting, I think, might solve a lot of these kind of questions and frustrations and be able to provide more clear direction moving forward. I certainly understand where Chief Pomey is coming from. People in this room are responsible for their own internal budgets as well, and are used to seeing things and producing things in a certain way. So it's just getting the right people in the room at the same time might help to relieve a lot of this.
Yeah, speaking of which, Todd, would you like to join in and provide additional comments on the perspective of the ATC?
Yeah, good,
Thanks.
good timing. I have time for about a 3 or 4 minute update from
Yes,
ATC.
please. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I mean, first, thanks, all the MDWPA staff for all the work. I know you're juggling a really complex governance structure that wasn't your design. I know the finance staff changes are kind of compounding some of these questions and issues for this fiscal year in particular. That said, I think the ATC feels really similar to what Dan Schwartz, Chiefs Pomey, and Roman just relayed. That there needs to be more structure in the process for developing, like reviewing, costing all these proposals, and then the version control when we navigate the feedback process that we're in right now. I love the idea of holding a joint meeting, so I want to work with you and ops to make that happen going forward. Whether we may have sort of passed the opportunity for this fiscal year, but I think starting much earlier in the process and developing more structure would be helpful to all of us. That said, so okay, the ATC met on April 2nd. We reviewed the remaining proposals, or most of them, on the work plan. I already reported last month on our first discussion, so I'm not going to rehash all that. Overall, the ATC is still supportive of the general direction of all the JPA-wide core projects, especially as you're seeing them now, since they already incorporate some of our feedback. Our discussion is already really well captured in the slides and the documents you're seeing today, and that may be, part of that frustration we have about version control, but regardless, it's there. There were no major concerns with the project mix that what we're seeing. Most of the conversations we had was really about how we're allocating the JPA-wide resources, how we explain the work more clearly to the board, the public. We spent some time discussing the feedback that we've received from this ops committee and from the executive committee. And we hear there's consistent themes. There's interest in programs that directly touch residents. We're in total agreement with all of this feedback. Things like the grants, direct assistance program, anything that shows like that tangible risk reduction at the home level or at the homeowner level. We hear you, and we're supportive of that approach also. And there were questions about the chipper program. This was feedback we got really from, I think, from ops and the executive committee about why the budget hasn't grown given how visible it is. And I think more broadly, there's a kind of an expectation that we do a better job explaining the science, the strategy, the work behind all of the approaches in the plan. Specifically on the chipper program, we spent a fair amount of time talking about this. We know the budget is currently about 1.4 million. Historically, we've been operating at about 80% utilization in that program. We had a pretty robust discussion on the metrics, how to measure success in that program. But our discussion wasn't really about growing the program. If anything, it was more or less whether we're sizing it appropriately. We landed, essentially that we should hold steady for now. We're mid-year. The busiest part of the season is still lying ahead. And there's a chance we could fully utilize the current budget. We don't want to cut it now and create problems going forward. But we don't think increasing the budget for the chipper program, even if that seems logical at some level, is justified by the data we're seeing. So the recommendation from the summary from the ATC is to improve that data visibility first. There's some requests from many of the agencies, but it was really specifically and clearly verbalized by Santa Fe. We heard this well. That we improve the data visibility, things like pickup locations, usage patterns, costs, revisit the budget sizing once we have better information. Some of that will lean on Fireside. We think the data is already there, and we're going to engage with them to look and see whether we can get some dashboards put together that better feed that information back to the people that, at the tactical level in the field. On the grants program, ATC supports keeping the JPA-wide program at roughly the current level, which is 900,000. So our bigger discussion was around maybe decentralizing how the funds are used. That there's general agreement with moving forward with the model where the funding largely remains JPA wide, but the allocations being pushed to the zones using a formula like what Ann mentioned earlier to give zones like Santa Fe and Nevada a little more control over their program design since they have more robust grant programs directly. Whereas the southwest and central zones have leaned into more of the voluntary abatement model to provide what's essentially really a grant. So that would give flexibility between reimbursement style grants and direct assistance. We know there's some accounting and boundary issues to work through, but that direction is supported. On the CWPP and the associated metrics that we were just discussing, the ATC supports continuing to fund the dashboards, the analytics, the follow-up work that's tied to the current CWPP update. We discussed, most of our discussion was really about avoiding the cost of annual updates that are ongoing. We appreciate that that this approach, aligns with the feedback that we received from ops and the scuttle we've heard from the executive committee. As much as we agree that we shouldn't probably be hearing anything from the executive committee, it's a little bit out of order. There are some concerns that the modeled outputs in the CWPP don't align with our local experience, especially around evacuation and alerting, but also just fuel modeling, wildfire modeling, fire behavior modeling. One point that was raised was it was raised by me, but I think I got good feedback from the other ATC members that we, even as ATC members, as the subject matter experts, need to understand the fire modeling better itself. We need to really work on honing our messaging to the public, what the models are actually showing and what their limitations are. The intent would be to make sure that we're interpreting the outputs correctly and not over relying on models without really strong context. It's critical. The models are difficult to interpret even for professionals who work in this field. So ATC is recommending a working session with the CWPP consultants before the public rollout, which we know is coming rapidly, just to walk through some of these issues, to have some additional discussion. And we continue to support the development of the story maps as long as the ATC and the subject matter experts really have an opportunity to review and better understand the data before it's released to the public. I'll wrap this up pretty quick here on the Ember Ready, our feedback, Ember Ready program, formerly the Zone Zero in a Box. The ATC's main feedback was that the staff just needs to be, staff at the agency level needs to be briefed before the rollout so they can better answer questions. We need a clear, simple explanation of the program for the public. We appreciate that Kathleen gave us some input, but we think that we need to fine tune that messaging and better understand it ourselves. But overall, we think it's a fantastic approach, and we're happy that program's moving forward. On a couple notes on the admin and finance side, agencies were told that we can continue to charge up to admin fee on local and DSpace funds, but we requested some clearer guidance from MWPA on what qualifies for that. So the overall message is stay the course on this. We think that overall we're supportive of where things stand right now, especially the version that you guys have seen today. We don't want to make changes to the chipper program based on partial data. We want to move forward with the flexible zone-based approach to grants. We want to fund the metrics and CWPP support work, but we want to be real careful about how the outputs are presented. And we need a better definition and communication about Ember Ready before it's rolled out. Any questions or thoughts?
Thanks so much, Todd.
I get, excuse me, I guess I have a thought, I guess, for Ann, really. I guess one of the frustrations, and it may just be me again, I'll take a page out of Chief Pomey's book here. It may just be me, but I don't think this group has had a presentation on the Ember Ready program yet and the change from Zone Zero. And we still have not been told officially, at least at this body, that the grant program is decentralizing potentially.
with the with the vacating of that position and such. And so I think there are some things operationally that are being missed. And if the intention from MWPA is that the ATC is pushing that up to this body, then that needs to be stated then, because I think there are some big pieces that are missing. And I know the executive board has heard a lot of these things as well. I think some things are missing here. And so that is one of the frustrations. And the brief out is big in that. But I think that presentation, and maybe it's just me, has been potentially missed because there's some things that I'm being asked about now that I just don't have an answer for. So.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that, and I want to make sure that that's not, me missing opportunities to better inform you, on some of these projects. And the obvious approach to me, at least with 10 seconds to think about it, is that I may need to do a more in-depth discussion of ATC's discussion and move it up in the agenda for an ops meeting, or we meet together and we sit down. Since we're an ad hoc committee, I don't see any reason why we can't take that approach. I think.
Yeah, and not to beat up the thing, but I think there is a better solution. I think that's what I'm hearing. If I'm hearing a common theme here is, we're 4 or 5 years into this, and I think there is an opportunity that to not only clean up a lot of these few things to make this smoother, because as we start to, crest the apex of this towards the next election of this or the re-election of it, I think we really need to tighten up and get our ducks more in a row. Between the ATC and operations, and I'm not sure what that answer is, and I'm open to any suggestion. And maybe it is a joint more often than not, like Eric suggested, or something along those lines. But I do think there are some cracks in our own armor here that just isn't going to be tolerable, I think, by the general public moving forward. So,
sure.
Yeah, thank you for all of that feedback. I think some of the solutions might be to move up the ATC process earlier in the year and to set deadlines earlier in the process for completion of new proposals being submitted and edits made to existing proposals. So I think that might be helpful. And then that in turn moves up our JPA-wide deadline. So we can revisit that whole process and then maybe cut the deadline for last minute edits. Some of the challenges that we'll need to work through are kind of Brown Act requirements around sharing information to this committee. We're a bit limited. What I would love to do is put shared documents in a file that we can all view and edit, but I can't do that with this committee. Making the ATC a non-Brown Act committee was key in being able to improve that coordination. And so we can explore additional ways to do that better, and then maybe revise some of our kind of technical tools so that we can view the proposals and make edits that at least at the ATC level, we can all view. All of these projects and proposals are available to anybody on this committee or the public to view through the portal. So you can go to our website and check that out, and I can send that, that link is in the staff report. But yeah, I agree. Let's check out this process and improve it for next year. We're always trying to do that each year, and each year it's just a little bit better.
And
this year is a complicated one though.
we do have the potentially are going to schedule a working group.
Yes.
Is there an opportunity to create a ad hoc working group with members of the ATC and members of operations, so we jointly and then report out on that ad hoc committee as an ad hoc committee to operations rather than ATC reporting to operations? If there's an opportunity to do that, I think that would be great to be able to do that this year. We might not, I'm not sure how productive we're going to be, but at least there's an opportunity for all of us to, a few of us to be participants.
Yeah. When we explored that and ATC was a Brown Act committee, we weren't able to do that. But now there may be some more opportunities that we didn't have previously. We do need to schedule an ad hoc subcommittee of the operations committee for this month, so we can dive into some of these topics during that time. And I'd love to hear.
And do you think that, can we do some research to see if we have ATC representatives either present at that ad hoc or be part of the ad hoc?
Yeah, I can check on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're at
Sorry, can I,
11:51, so I want to make
it might
sure.
be helpful at some point to have just a general discussion of where today the ATC and the committee are seen in the organization in terms of our role. For me, it's often hard, and I see Bill's here because, you know, he was in the same rooms with me, Chris Woods, some others, with the original vision of how this was supposed to work, which is not, you know, once the elected started creating their own committees, it kind of screwed all that up. But originally, I had understood that the ATC was going to be less worried about budget and more concerned about telling us what were great ideas. And then this committee was supposed to sit down and say, well, if you have a dollar and the total cost is $1.50, how are we going to figure out what we want to do, given the ATC said all these ideas are really good? It's, the more and more I listen, and I've listened over the last year, I mean, I think the ATC's taken on a lot of that heartburn themselves of arguing about how the money should be spent. And I had always understood that was going to be this committee's job, was when the pie was only so big, we would figure out how to apportion it based on what we had heard the ATC said was really good. So it might be helpful to just have a presentation of where everybody thinks their roles are now, because this committee's constantly kind of evolving too. And Chief Pomey and I sit on the finance committee now, and it gets a little confused about its role sometimes. But at the end of the day, the board said that committee would also pour into all these numbers, and it would kind of, I'd appreciate that. Just kind of how is this stuff in the staff's mind flowing? It's supposed to flow.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. That seems to be the end of discussion for item number 7. And we're going to move on to item number 8 here, committee reports. Todd Lando, can we consider that you've already given your report, or do you have something additional?
No, that was my report.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we'll move on to item number 10. Do any committee members have requests for future agenda items?
I'm just, it might be answered offline, but I'm kind of curious where we stand on the local kind of accounting and admin functions of this agency. I know there's been a lot of shakeup, a lot of challenges. So any updates we can get on that would be helpful. I don't think that even what typically goes out in January, disbursements have gone out yet or anything else. So would appreciate an update.
Yeah, absolutely. We have been changing our approach to the finance component. So the JPA language requires that we use a member agency at least as well as our treasurer. So we've been using Southern Marin Fire, and that's gone well for a very long time. Some staff left Southern Marin Fire. That transition has been bumpy. And so it's been a challenge to get even basic information about dollars and dollars distributed and all of that. The closeout of the 24-25 year is just in progress now, and I think we're close to getting that done. Southern Marin Fire has contracted with some folks to help with finance now, and they're great. So that's really helped. So, but I think moving forward, Mark has been talking with another member agency to take on that financial piece and do our payroll and track the dollars. So I think Southern Marin Fire's contractors will set up kind of the process for next year, and then we'll be transitioning to a different member agency and their staff to be doing the finances for us from now on. There will be some savings in terms of that contract because we've been paying for those services. Those savings we may be able to use to hire on or contract with an additional kind of accounting person or bookkeeper. We're just not sure yet. We're going to talk with our new member agency on that. But we're hoping that this will be kind of a more robust system. And then, you know, if we need to add on to that, we may add a contractor to kind of to work internally to do bookkeeping and finance and invoices and things like that. So we're working within the existing structure of the JPA language to comply with that and trying to make it more smooth.
Thank you. I know I brought this up at our subcommittee meeting, and there's been a lot of different talk about what should be some in-house staff or not. And I understand the JPA language. I don't know if there's opportunity to relook at that, especially as we're talking about reauthorization potentially. But for a $20 million agency, it might make more sense, at least to me, to bring that level in-house instead of kind of working with one of the member agencies to do it, who obviously have their own commitments as well. But I just feel like that might be helpful and worth discussing, especially as you're looking at potential reauthorization.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Just to follow up, so can we assume that we will receive this year's distribution before the end of the fiscal year? Because that is a total of about 8 or 9 million. That's, that's out there. So as we're all in budget season and planning, we know that the taxes collected, 55% is collected in December. We always received our first installment in January. The second installment is collected April 10th, tomorrow. We always received it, by the end of April, just so that we can count for it, get those funds, into our books before we go into next year. So is there any feeling we will have it or not by the end of the fiscal year?
Check with the contractors that Mark's been working with on that. Yeah. So very likely, yes, and I'll check in on timing.
Who is the contractor?
Primarily, we've been going through AP Triton, and they've had a number of subcontractors we've been using, but we've upstaffed 4 times what we were before.
Thank you.
Okay, Martina's flagging me down, so I think I forgot something.
Just wanted to make sure we circled back around for public comment. I did not notice that there were any hands either in the room or the remote environment. But I did just want to survey the public who is here joining us. If there were any members of the public who wish to speak regarding the discussion item of the work plan or the ATC report, please raise your hand in the reactions. And I don't see any hands in the room, and there were none at the time, and there are no hands in the reactions at this time, sir.
Okay, thank you for looking out for me, Martina. Okay, that'll bring us to item number 11, adjournment. Our next meeting will be May 7th. And Ann, I just wanted to make sure, is the meeting time 1 to 3?
That is likely correct, and it was probably moved to avoid some other standing committee.
So a little different time, a little different start time on May 7th, 1 to 3. So, and we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate all your input.